MTC. Unit 12 No Analysis. Comma. Let's return to a time in which photographs were not in living color. During that period, people referred to pictures as photographs rather than black and white photographs as we do today. The possibility of color did not exist, so it was unnecessary to insert the adjective black and white. However, suppose we did include the phrase black and white before the existence of color photography. By highlighting that reality, we become conscious of current limitations and thus open our minds to new possibilities and potential opportunities. World War I was given that name only after we were deeply embattled in World War II. 1-2. Before that horrific period of the 1940s, World War I was simply called the Great War or, even worse, the War to End All Wars. 1940, 1. What if we had called it World War I back in 1918? 19181? Such a label might have made the possibility of a second worldwide conflict a greater reality for governments and individuals. We become conscious of issues when we explicitly identify them. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 12 No 01. Comma. Human innovation in agriculture has unlocked modifications in apples, tulips, and potatoes that never would have been realized through a plant's natural reproductive cycles. This cultivation process has created some of the recognizable vegetables and fruits consumers look for in their grocery stores. However, relying on only a few varieties of cultivated crops can leave humankind vulnerable to starvation and agricultural loss if a harvest is destroyed. For example, 1 million people died over the course of 3 years during the Irish potato famine because the Irish relied primarily on potatoes and milk to create a nutritionally balanced meal. 3. In order to continue its symbiotic relationship with cultivated plants, humanity must allow for biodiversity and recognize the potential drawbacks that monocultures of plants can introduce. Planting seeds of all kinds, even if they don't seem immediately useful or profitable, can ensure the longevity of those plants for generations to come. A balance must be struck between nature's capacity for wildness and humanity's desire for control. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 12 No 02. Comma. The objective point of view is illustrated by John Ford's philosophy of camera. John Ford. Ford considered the camera to be a window and the audience to be outside the window viewing the people and events within. Ford. We are asked to watch the actions as if they were taking place at a distance, and we are not asked to participate. The objective point of view employs a static camera as much as possible in order to produce this window effect, and it concentrates on the actors and the action without drawing attention to the camera. The objective camera suggests an emotional distance between camera and subject. The camera seems simply to be recording, as straightforwardly as possible, the characters and actions of the story. For the most part, the director uses natural, normal types of camera positioning and camera angles. The objective camera does not comment on or interpret the action but merely records it, letting it unfold. We see the action from the viewpoint of an impersonal observer. If the camera moves, it does so unnoticeably, calling as little attention to itself as possible. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 12 No 03. Comma. On projects in the built environment, people consider safety and functionality non-negotiable. But the aesthetics of a new project, how it is designed, is too often considered irrelevant. The question of how its design affects human beings is rarely asked. People think that design makes something highfalutin, called architecture, and that architecture differs from building, just as surely as the Washington National Cathedral differs from the local community church. This distinction between architecture and building, or more generally, between design and utility, couldn't be more wrong. More and more we are learning that the design of all our built environments matters so profoundly that safety and functionality must not be our only urgent priorities. All kinds of design elements influence people's experiences, not only of the environment but also of themselves. They shape our cognitions, emotions, and actions, and even our well-being. They actually help constitute our very sense of identity. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 12 No. 04. Spine-tingling ghost stories are fun to tell if they are really scary, and even more so if you claim that they are true. People get a thrill from passing on those stories. The same applies to miracle stories. If a rumor of a miracle gets written down in a book, the rumor becomes hard to challenge, especially if the book is ancient. If a rumor is old enough, it starts to be called a tradition instead, and then people believe it all the more. This is rather odd because you might think they would realize that older rumors have had more time to get distorted than younger rumors that are close in time to the alleged events themselves. Elvis Presley and Michael Jackson lived too recently for traditions to have grown up, so not many people believe stories like Elvis seen on Mars. Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, Elvis. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 12 No. 05. Sudden success or winnings can be very dangerous. Neurologically, chemicals are released in the brain that give a powerful burst of excitement and energy, leading to the desire to repeat this experience. It can be the start of any kind of addiction or manic behavior. Also, when gains come quickly, we tend to lose sight of the basic wisdom that true success, to really last, must come through hard work. We do not take into account the role that luck plays in such sudden gains. We try again and again to recapture that high from winning so much money or attention. We acquire feelings of superiority. We become especially resistant to anyone who tries to warn us they don't understand, we tell ourselves. Because this cannot be sustained, we experience an inevitable fall, which is all the more painful, leading to the depression part of the cycle. Although gamblers are the most prone to this, it equally applies to business people during bubbles and to people who gain sudden attention from the public. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 12 No. 06. I was sitting outside a restaurant in Spain one summer evening, waiting for dinner. The aroma of the kitchens excited my taste buds. My future meal was coming to me in the form of molecules drifting through the air, too small for my eyes to see but detected by my nose. The ancient Greeks first came upon the idea of atoms this way. The smell of baking bread suggested to them that small particles of bread existed beyond vision. The cycle of weather reinforced this idea. A puddle of water on the ground gradually dries out, disappears, and then falls later as rain. They reasoned that there must be particles of water that turn into steam, form clouds, and fall to earth, so that the water is conserved even though the little particles are too small to see. My paella in Spain had inspired me, 4,000 years too late, to take the credit for atomic theory. 4. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 12 No. 07. A story is only as believable as the storyteller. For story to be effective, trust must be established. Yes, trust. Whenever someone stops to listen to you, an element of unspoken trust exists. Your listener unconsciously trusts you to say something worthwhile to him, something that will not waste his time. The few minutes of attention he is giving you is sacrificial. He could choose to spend his time elsewhere, yet he has stopped to respect your part in a conversation. This is where story comes in. Because a story illustrates points clearly and often bridges topics easily, trust can be established quickly, and recognizing this time element to story is essential to trust. Respecting your listener's time is the capital letter at the beginning of your sentence. It leads the conversation into a sentence worth listening to if trust is earned and not taken for granted. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 12 No. 08. A champion of free speech and religious toleration, Voltaire was a controversial figure. Voltaire. He is, for instance, supposed to have declared, "I hate what you say, but will defend to the death your right to say it, a powerful defense of the idea that even views that you despise deserve to be heard. In 18th century Europe, however, the Catholic Church strictly controlled what could be published. 1-8. Many of Voltaire's plays and books were censored and burned in public, and he was even imprisoned in the Bastille in Paris because he had insulted a powerful aristocrat. Voltaire, Bastille. But none of this stopped him challenging the prejudices and pretensions of those around him. In his short philosophical novel, Candide, he completely undermined the kind of religious optimism about humanity and the universe that other contemporary thinkers had expressed, and he did it in such an entertaining way that the book became an instant bestseller. Candide. Wisely, Voltaire left his name off the title page, otherwise its publication would have landed him in prison again for making fun of religious beliefs. Voltaire. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 12 No 09. Our culture is biased toward the fine arts, those creative products that have no function other than pleasure. Craft objects are less worthy, because they serve an everyday function, they're not purely creative. But this division is culturally and historically relative. Most contemporary high art began as some sort of craft. The composition and performance of what we now call classical music began as a form of craft music satisfying required functions in the Catholic Mass, or the specific entertainment needs of royal patrons. For example, chamber music really was designed to be performed in chambers, small intimate rooms in wealthy homes, often as background music. The dances composed by famous composers from Bach to Chopin originally did indeed accompany dancing. Bach Chopin. But today, with the contexts and functions they were composed for gone, we listen to these works as fine art. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 12 Number 10. Painters have in principle an infinite range of colors at their disposal, especially in modern times with the chromatic explosion of synthetic chemistry. And yet painters don't use all the colors at once, and indeed many have used a remarkably restrictive selection. Mondrian limited himself mostly to the three primaries red, yellow, and blue to fill his black-ruled grids, and Casimir Malevich worked with similar self-imposed restrictions. Mondrian, 3, Casimir Malevich. For Yves Klein, one color was enough. Franz Klein's art was typically black on white. Yves Klein, Franz Klein. There was nothing new in this. The Greeks and Romans tended to use just red, yellow, black and white. Why? It's impossible to generalize, but both in antiquity and modernity it seems likely that the limited palette aided clarity and comprehensibility, and helped to focus attention on the components that mattered, shape and form. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 12 Number 11. The ancient Egyptians and Mesopotamians were the Western world's philosophical forebears. In their concept of the world, nature was not an opponent in life's struggles. Rather, man and nature were in the same boat, companions in the same story. Man thought of the natural world in the same terms as he thought of himself and other men. The natural world had thoughts, desires, and emotions, just like humans. Thus, the realms of man and nature were indistinguishable and did not have to be understood in cognitively different ways. Natural phenomena were imagined in the same terms as human experience. These ancients of the Near East did recognize the relation of cause and effect, but when speculating about it they came from a who rather than a what perspective. When the Nile rose, it was because the river wanted to, not because it had rained. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 12 Number 12. A phenomenon in social psychology, the pratfall effect states that an individual's perceived attractiveness increases or decreases after he or she makes a mistake depending on the individual's perceived competence. Pratfall effect. As celebrities are generally considered to be competent individuals, and often even presented as flawless or perfect in certain aspects, committing blunders will make one's humanness endearing to others. Basically, those who never make mistakes are perceived as being less attractive and likable than those who make occasional mistakes. Perfection, or the attribution of that quality to individuals, creates a perceived distance that the general public cannot relate to, making those who never make mistakes perceived as being less attractive or likable. However, this can also have the opposite effect. If a perceived average or less than average competent person makes a mistake, he or she will be less attractive and likable to others.